In 1952, you could find this weed remedy printed right in the back of farm almanacs and seed catalogs, a pantry powder about $2 worth, poured on weeds at dusk, by the next morning dead. Then the big chemical brands flooded the market with patented sprays, and that little recipe quietly vanished from every catalog by the 1960s. Not because anyone proved it wrong, but because there was no profit in a box that already sat on your shelf. I tried it on my own creeping weeds last summer, and my neighbors thought I'd hired a service. Stick around to the end, because the reason it works best at night isn't superstition. It's one specific thing the sun does to that powder that nobody ever explains. Let me tell you exactly who buried this, because it wasn't a mystery and it wasn't a coincidence. After the war, a synthetic weed killer called 2,4-D hit the American market, commercialized in 1945 and 1946, and it changed everything overnight. For the first time, a company could sell you a chemical that killed broadleaf weeds and leave your grass standing. That was a real breakthrough, I'll give them that. But here's where the old recipe got pushed off the page. In 1947, Congress passed a law most homeowners have never heard of, the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA for short. From then on, a product could only be officially recommended as a weed killer if it was registered and labeled for that purpose. Registered, labeled, owned. That's a system built for a company with a patent and a marketing budget. It was never built for a plain box of mineral powder that had been sitting on kitchen shelves in this country since 1891. Nobody was going to spend a dime registering something they couldn't own, so the extension agents stopped mentioning it. The seed catalogs that printed it through the 1950s quietly dropped it by the 1960s. Not because it failed, because there was no money in it and no label on it. And while that little recipe disappeared, the branded sprays moved into every hardware store in America. Now look at what that cost you. A bottle of selective broadleaf herbicide runs $20 to $40, and you buy it again the next season and the season after that, because creeping weeds come back every single year. That's the whole business model. Repeat purchases forever. Meanwhile, the $2 box that handled the same job sat forgotten in the laundry aisle, doing nothing. But washing clothes, you've been paying for the patent year after year, plus the added chemical exposure of spraying synthetic herbicide on your yard every spring. So let me walk you through what those catalogs actually printed before the ad dollars went somewhere else. Here's the powder. It's borax, plain old borax. The same white box of 20 Mule Team you've seen on the bottom shelf of the laundry aisle your whole life. It's been sold in America since 1891, sits in pantries and laundry rooms from coast to coast, and runs you about $2 to $4 for a box that'll last you years. The active ingredient is boron. On the side of the box, it's called sodium tetraborate. But boron is the part that does the work. That's it. That's the whole secret the catalogs printed back in 1952. A common mineral sitting in plain sight in a box most of you already own. And the weed it goes after is Creeping Charlie. You might know it as ground ivy. The folks with the Latin call it Glaucoma hederaceae. But you'll know it the second you see it. Little scalloped leaves round and crinkled at the edges, riding along on vines that creep flat over the top of your lawn and root down wherever they touch. It mats. It spreads sideways faster than your grass can keep up. And here's the part that drives every homeowner half crazy. You can pull it, but it regrows from any little fragment you leave behind in the soil. Snap one vine and you've practically planted two. Most general weed and feed products just slide right off it. You spray, you wait, and that scalloped leaf is still sitting there grinning at you. The same trick works on Creeping Jenny and on some of the low clovers too, but Creeping Charlie is the one it was famous for. Now, the way the old almanacs told it, you wait until dusk, the very end of the day, when the sun's going down, and you put the borax on. I'll come back to why dusk matters, because that's the one piece nobody ever explains, and it's the whole reason this works at all. But that's the picture, a $2 box, a creeping weed, and the last light of the evening. That's why you won't find it in a single modern product catalog. There's no box to sell you that you don't already have. So why does a laundry powder kill a weed and leave your grass standing? This is the part the chemical brands never had any reason to teach you. Boron is what they call a trace micronutrient. Every plant on Earth needs a tiny bit of it to live, a whisper of it. Really, but like a lot of things, the dose makes the poison. A little boron is food. Too much boron is toxic. And here's the beautiful part, the part that makes this whole thing work. Creeping Charlie is hypersensitive to boron. It can't handle even a modest amount. Your lawn grass, your bluegrass, your fescue, your ryegrass tolerates far, far more of it before it ever blinks. So there's a gap. There's a window where the dose is heavy enough to kill the creeping Charlie stone dead, and light enough that the grass around it never even notices. You're not poisoning your yard. You're threading a needle that nature already threaded for you. You're exploiting a tolerance gap between two plants. And that, right there, is why this couldn't survive in the modern market. You can't patent a mineral. Boron is an element. It's on the periodic table. Nobody invented it. Nobody owns it, and nobody could slap a trademark on it and lock everybody else out. There was no way to dress it up, no way to call it new and improved, no way to own the rights to a rock that's been in the ground since the beginning of time. So the people who remembered it kept right on using it quietly in their own backyards, while the catalogs moved on to the things somebody could put a name and a patent on. Now let's talk about how much, because this is where folks either get a thick green lawn or make a mess, and the difference is just knowing the numbers. The classic recipe, the one printed in those old farm almanacs, goes like this. You take about 10 ounces of borax, you dissolve it first in a small amount of warm water, maybe 4 ounces, just enough to break it down so it isn't gritty. Borax doesn't like to dissolve in cold water, so warm is the trick. Once it's dissolved, you mix that into about 2.5 gallons of water. That 2.5 gallons covers right around 1,000 square feet of lawn. That's your spray it dose for a patch that's got creeping Charlie running all through it. If you've just got a spot here and there, you can skip the mixing altogether and do a light dry dusting. Just a thin scatter of the dry powder right on the leaves of the weed itself. Light, a dusting, not a pile. I'll come back to that because there's a right and a wrong way that has everything to do with what time of day you do it. Here's what you'll see. Within 24 to 48 hours, that creeping Charlie starts to wilt. The leaves go limp, the vines lose their starch, the whole mat starts to sag. Within 3 to 5 days, it browns out. It dies back, goes crispy, and you can rake it right out, and the grass around it, green, standing untouched. That's the part that had my neighbors knocking on my door, thinking I'd hired some service with a tank and a logo on the truck. Scan the QR code on screen right now. Take your phone out of your pocket, open your camera, and point it at the screen. I hadn't hired anybody. I'd spent about $2 on a box of laundry powder. Compare that to the branded selective broadleaf herbicide on the shelf, $20 to $40 a bottle, and you're back for another one next year. $2 against $40, and the $2 version was the one that actually finished the job on my creeping Charlie. That's the kind of math the catalog stopped doing for you somewhere around 1960. Now I'd be doing you wrong if I stopped there, because there's a deeper layer to this. And it's the layer that explains why this could never, ever have been sold as a spray-it-everywhere mass product. Here it is. Boron does not break down. The synthetic herbicides, your 2,4-D and the rest, they degrade. They do their job. And then over weeks, the soil microbes in the sunlight break them down and they're gone. Boron doesn't do that. It's a mineral. It accumulates. Whatever boron you put down stays in that soil and adds to whatever's already there. And that means if you get greedy, if you dump it on thick, or blanket your whole lawn with it, or do it 3 times a season. Because a little worked, so you figure a lot works better, you don't just kill the creeping Charlie. You can build the boron up to where nothing will grow there. You can sterilize a patch of ground for a full season or longer, bare dirt, nothing. So the real secret of this method isn't the powder. The powder's been on the shelf for over 100 years. The real secret is restraint, precision. You spot treat only, you go after the creeping Charlie where it lives, not the whole yard. You do it no more than once a year on any given patch. And you never ever blanket apply it across a healthy lawn. Used that way, with a careful hand, it's the cheapest, cleanest fix for creeping Charlie there is. Used like a man with a grudge, it'll leave you a dead spot you'll be reseeding next spring. And now you can see exactly why the industry was glad to let this one die. You cannot sell precision and restraint in a bottle with a trigger sprayer. You cannot put use sparingly, spot treat only. Once a year on a product you want flying off the shelves by the pallet. They needed something a fellow could spray up and down his whole lawn, walk away from, and come back and buy again. Borax is the opposite of that. It asks you to know what you're doing and to use a light touch. That's not a flaw in the method. That's the whole reason it worked for the old-timers and got buried for everybody else. The men who remembered it understood you treat the weed, not the lawn, and that bit of wisdom doesn't fit on a price tag. So to put the whole thing in your hands plain, you find your creeping Charlie. You either mix your 10 ounces of borax into your 2.5 gallons for a patch around 1,000 square feet, or you lightly dust the dry powder right on the leaves for a spot here and there. You go after the weed and the weed only. You do it once a year, no more, on that ground. And you do it at dusk, at the very end of the day, as the light's going down. I keep saying dusk, and I keep promising to tell you why. And I'm going to, because that timing is not an old wives' tale, and it is not superstition. It's the single difference between the folks who tried this and swore it was junk, and the folks like me whose neighbors come knocking. There is one specific thing that happens out there at night, and one specific thing the sun does in the daytime, that decides whether that boron ever gets inside the plant or just sits there on the leaf doing absolutely nothing. Get that one piece wrong and the best recipe in the world fails on you. Get it right, and a $2 box does what a $40 bottle couldn't. That's the method. Top to bottom. The powder, the weed, the dose, and the warning that keeps you from overdoing it. Everything the almanacs of 1952 knew and the catalogs of 1960 conveniently forgot. Before I tell you about that one piece of nighttime timing that ties it all together, let me pause for just a second. Everything I just walked you through, the full recipe. Scan the QR code on screen right now. Take your phone out of your pocket, open your camera, and point it at the screen. The exact dose, the weed it works on, is written out plain in my little book. The Old Ways, 50 Forgotten Lawn Secrets from America's Greatest Groundskeepers. The borax trick has its own page in there, secret number 17, the laundry aisle weed killer, with the measurements laid out clean so you don't have to scribble them down off this video. The whole book runs $19, and you'll find it over at GarrySlawnBooks.com. Now, if you're watching this on the TV, go ahead and reach for your phone and scan that QR code right there on the screen, or just type GarrySlawnBooks.com into your browser. No rush at all. Take your time, I'll wait right here. While you get it pulled up, then let me tell you why this little recipe really got buried. Here's the honest truth of it, and it isn't complicated. The synthetic sprays that came after the war, 2,4-D. The weed and feed bags stacked up at every store, those were patented products. A patent means one company owns it and nobody else can make it. That's a business. You buy a bottle this year, you buy another next year, and the year after that, because the weeds always come back. That's repeat money, season after season, locked up by the patent. Borax can't play that game. It's a mineral. It came out of the ground in the California desert, and the 20-mule team hauled it. Nobody can own a mineral. One box lasts you years on your own lawn. There's no repeat sale, no patent, no business model. So no company on earth had a reason to spend a dime promoting it. Then layer the law on top of that. The 1947 FIFRA system meant that to officially recommend a product as a weed killer, somebody had to register it and label it for that use. Registration costs money. Now ask yourself, who's going to pay to register a generic laundry powder they can't own and can't profit from? Nobody. So the extension agents stopped citing it. The seed catalogs that ran on ad dollars from the spray companies quietly dropped the recipe. By the 1960s, it was simply gone from the page. Not disproven, just unprofitable and therefore invisible. Now I'll be straight with you because you deserve it. There's a real objection here, and it's the one I gave you earlier. Boron builds up in the soil. Overdo it and you can salt your own ground for a season or more. That part is true. But here's the thing. That real risk became the convenient excuse to bury the whole method instead of teaching folks the correct dose. It's a lot easier to say that old stuff is dangerous by the bottle than to teach a man to spot treat with restraint. And while all that was happening, you were the one paying for it, bottle after bottle, $40 a pop, year after year, fighting a weed that a $2 box on a dewy night would have handled. So now to the piece I promised you, The one thing the sun does that nobody ever explains. Borax has to dissolve in moisture before a weed's leaf can pull it inside. That's the whole secret in one sentence. When you put it down at dusk, the evening dew settles and slow and gentle over the next few hours dissolves. That powder right on the leaf. And the creeping Charlie draws the boron in over 8 to 10 hours of darkness. Slow and steady, all night long, the plant is drinking its own poison. Come morning, the work's already done. Now do that same thing at 10 in the morning in full sun, and here's what happens. The sun's heat evaporates that surface moisture in a matter of minutes. Gone. The boron never dissolves long enough to get inside the plant. It just recrystallizes into a dry, inert little crust sitting on top of the leaf, doing absolutely nothing until a breeze comes along and blows it clean off. That right there is why the daytime fellows tried this and swore up and down the old recipe was junk. They weren't wrong about what they saw. They were just doing it under the one condition that guarantees it can't work. 2 more refinements and you'll get neighbor-knocking results every single time. First, put it down on a still, dewy evening with no rain in the forecast for the next day. Or 2, and hear me, rain is not the same as dew. A hard rain washes the powder clean off before the slow dew absorption ever finishes. You want gentle dew, not a downpour. Second, don't mow for 2 or 3 days before or after. You need intact leaf surface for that boron to soak through. Mow it off and you've thrown away your doorway in. So there you have it, the powder, the weed, the dose, and the dusk timing. Scan the QR code on screen right now to take your phone out of your pocket, open your camera, and point it at the screen. That ties the whole thing together. If you want the rest of the tricks the catalog's dropped, that timing piece has its own home in the book too. Secret number 31 is called Working at Dusk, Reading the Dew the Old Groundskeeper's Way, and it's all about why those old fellows did their best work at last light. How to read the dew before you ever open a box. Same book, The Old Ways, same $19, over at GarrySlonBooks.com. Go ahead now and grab your phone. Scan that QR code on the screen or type GarrySlonBooks.com in yourself. Take your time pulling it up. There's no hurry. I'll be right here. Now you've got the trick they quietly dropped from the page, and the whole shelf of them is waiting whenever you're ready. So that's the long and short of it. A $2 box of borax dusted on your creeping Charlie at dusk kills that weed by morning while your good grass stays green because it's the dew. That carries it in, not the sun. Now you can clear out the one weed. That beats every bottle on the shelf for about the price of a cup of coffee. Next time around, I'll show you the breakfast table mineral the old groundskeepers used to green up a tired, worn-out lawn practically overnight without dragging home a single bag of synthetic fertilizer. Until then, keep that lawn thick and green, my friend, and I'll see you over the fence.